Right. Let's see here. Okay. All right. We have our next session and panel ready to roll. So, why MDM, why care, and why now? Well, we're here to find out. In this next session, you'll hear from data heroes who are leveraging the significance of master data management. We'll learn why they chose MDM against all of the other things or priorities that they could be doing, why they decided to care in the first place, and what drove their urgency with master data management in general. And so having said that, please help me welcome Bruce Fitzgerald, Director of BI and Data Architecture at the YMCA, Chris Ball, Data Governance Manager at Lexmark, Ursula Catone, Chief Data and Architecture Officer at Huntington Bank, and then Malcolm Hawker, who you all know by now, Head of Data Strategy at Prophecy. Thank you all for joining. Take it away, Malcolm.
Thanks so much, Reed. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who is attending our first inaugural Data Hero Summit. We are thrilled you were taking time out of your busy day to join us. I say the same thing to our guests. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to speak with us today and share your expertise. So why MDM, why care, why now? I'm obviously a little biased when it comes to MDM, having been a Gartner analyst around this, but I'd love to hear from you guys about why now. There's a lot of stuff we could be working on. There's data catalogs, there's data meshes, there's AI, there's all sorts of stuff, but why MDM? Let me start with you, Bruce. What kind of was the trigger to lead the Y into their MDM journey?
So the trigger for the YMCA was the size and the organizational structure and our strategic goals combined. So the YMCA has over 2,600 branches, which roll up into about 860 different associations, and that's just in the US. With that size and combined with the fact that we're organized as a federated IT model, and so every single branch is responsible for their own systems, their own data. But our strategic goals involved understanding more about our members, more about our programs, more about the different staff that we have. In order to do that, we have to collect a lot of data from all of these federated IT departments. We've been doing that for about 6 years with files, and it's just a very complex, error-prone, and intensive work that we have to do to accomplish that. What we've decided to do was to improve our communication with the IT departments by coordinating on a common method or a common model or a common data model to be able to acquire the data that we're looking at. And also we're ingesting a lot more data sources. So we're bringing data in from LinkedIn. We're bringing data in from employee survey platforms. So with all of this different data and all of these different people responsible for that data, number one, we needed to have a common ground where we could communicate on the structure and how we're bringing that data in. And MDM for us was a transformational choice because it allows us to create that common model. It allows us to have an API interface that allows the external IT departments to connect up to that and to send and transfer data back and forth using the common data model definition.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. You talked about a few really important things. I love the phrase common language, right? Everybody needs a common language. If we're only operating off our own language, it's really, really difficult simply to communicate. So I love that. But one other thing that you touched on, Bruce, there was the idea that MDM was foundational to your business strategy.
Yes.
So Chris, I know from the perspective of Lexmark and kind of overall transformation, Bruce also used the word transformation, and I know that's a word near and dear to your heart as well. So what is it that drove Lexmark to MDM now?
So, well, we actually have quite a mature MDM organization at Lexmark. as we centralized our operations with an offshore model with global business services, we moved a lot of that to Cebu, and we had all of our master data focused there, but it never had a proper home in the business. It was part of supply chain at the start, and then it was part of IT. And so as we reorganized the business, it's like, where's the right place for master data? And one of the initiatives we had in our global business service organization was about digital transformation, making sure data is an asset for Lexmark and our company. And master data was key to that. And it was finally like we finally found our proper home is we belong in this global service organization as a service that we provide to the entire organization. And as part of a focus specifically on digital transformation, it really allowed us to be in the right home with the right organization to move us forward.
Love the transformational aspect. Been a common theme now 2 times. Now, when I think about large banks, Ursula, and Chris mentioned kind of established, mature MDM organizations, banks have kind of been doing this a while, right? But the way that I look at MDM can be managed fairly defensively and just do the minimum to make sure that you're not breaking the laws and that you're, compliant from a legal or regulatory perspective, which I'm sure you and all banks have been doing. But what has it led you to increase your investment around MDM, implement MDM solution to help with more of the transformational aspect, which isn't an area historically, I would say, that we have thought much about MDM, but it's been a common theme here, and it's been a common theme in all the conversations I had. How does MDM fit as a transformational kind of agent, as it were, within your organization?
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of other programs that you could do instead of doing MDM, let's say. But MDM is really foundational to all of those other programs. So whether you want to invest more in marketing or artificial intelligence, regardless of where you want to place those investments, those foundational components of a master data platform, somewhere where it is your authoritative source for, like for us, it's been customer and accounts have been the primary focus. It allows us to then do householding. It allows us to make sure that we're not sending the same offer to the customer 10 different times because I have 10 different versions of the customer in my systems, right? It really helps with monitoring the quality of the data. So whether you call that defensive, you could also turn that around and make it offensive, right? Because the goal of being able to interact with your customers, being able to use some of the new technologies, all rely on having a good version of that customer, and for us also accounts.
Yeah. In our conversations, Chris, previously, I think you had mentioned that the MDM team is actually part of a transformation team, correct?
Yeah. So as we started out, like I said, MDM Mass was compared to for
Chris, you're kind of coming in and out, which is not much of your fault. Oh, sorry, I'm talking over you. You were kind of coming in and out because you're coming from Geneva, Switzerland. I think you're okay now. Give it a whirl.
Is it better now? Okay.
I think so.
So the organization we set up was actually called Data to Value, about how to make data a strategic asset for Lexmark. And the first piece was putting us as master data at the cornerstone of that, because we touch everything: sales, logistics, purchasing. We're involved with everything. Specifically, my team manages customer, vendor, product, material, master data. So we're touching every system, our purchasing, our transactions, accounting, finance, everything is involved with us. So it was really foundational that as part of the digital transformation that we're trying to make, master data is a big part of that, and making sure we have that information to build off of.
So that's interesting. If you had attended the second keynote earlier today, Brian Zank from Nestle Purina said pretty much the exact same thing. They had put the MDM function with actually kind of in a transformation role within the organization, which I think is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Something else you had mentioned, Chris, this kind of idea of multi-domain. You said it kind of without saying it. Mm-hmm. I'll take the nerdy approach and say multi-domain. But Bruce, you had also mentioned that as well. Right, you had talked about locations and members and employees, and if I'm kind of hearing you correctly, what I'm hearing, Bruce, you had said in the beginning, I'm paraphrasing you, is that MDM is the way you're going to tie all of that together. Is that correct?
Yeah, I described the problem that we have as a siloed data problem. So we've got a lot of good data in a lot of silos that we can't connect up to. And so, master data allows us to establish rules to be able to connect all of those siloed data bits.
So breaking silos is what MDM is all about. if you ask me, that's kind of my dinner party answer. Yep. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah. So what we're doing with our master data and where we are is, so one of the things we have is customer and vendor master data. And by putting them into a single system with Prophecy, for example, we've got the multiple domains. We're managing all of this data, but when it comes to our relationship with our customer, we could also have a vendor relationship with them. So we're sharing the same data in terms of it's the same legal entity. It's just a different relationship that we're managing. So we're able to share that information across the domains and give the business a full view of our relationship in total with that customer, vendor, that entire entity, whether it crosses domains.
And the relationship part is just so key from an MDM perspective. A lot of people think of MDM and think, oh, okay, well, gold master record, the source of truth. But it's also about managing those relationships. That's a great point. Ursula, when we had chatted before, relationships is something that is key to you as well. I mean, you had just mentioned householding.
Yep.
Right. What role does MDM help play kind of writ large in helping to manage or optimize those relationships? Obviously, it's about the data, but it's a little bit more than data as well, is it not?
Yeah. So as I think about something like a householding, we have a ton of different venues in which we can originate a new customer into the bank. And like Chris just mentioned, we have different types of customers, right? So I've got individual, I also have business customers, and sometimes the individuals at the business are the customers as well. So being able to get that full view of a customer absolutely helps a ton for us thinking about our customers very holistically. And again, really falls back to what makes MDM so important to us is how foundational it is to everything else we do with data.
It's interesting. So what you had just kind of mentioned is the different dimensions or different relationship types with a customer. And I would see this all the time at Gartner, where companies were running on often legacy infrastructures, often an ERP, where there was a customer table and a supplier table and a vendor table and all of these other things that actually didn't talk to each other. It was like Bruce describing these silos. And one of the great things about MDM is it allows you to kind of take a greenfield approach. I'm waving up here, a greenfield approach in solving and breaking a lot of those silos without necessarily even maybe breaking them in the source systems. You can create a new model that you had mentioned, yes, Bruce, to model those things correctly within an MDM, where you take more of maybe what could be a party type approach, where you could have a customer or a partner or a vendor, and do that without completely and totally ripping and replacing your ERP system. So I love that stuff. Ursula, let's stay with you now. When talking about now, right, and the urgency, something that I heard often when I was at Gartner was, well, we get it about MDM, single source of truth and customer, 360 and vendor 360 and all that. We get that, but we're just not ready. Right? Or we're not mature enough, or we have to do a maturity assessment, or we have to do all these other governance related tasks. What would you say if you heard somebody say that? Say, you know what, we get the value, but I'm not sure we're ready.
I'd say you'd probably never be ready. There's so much to be done, especially in the with regards to data governance. But often, and what we've found is the two go hand in hand, right? So the governance, as I mentioned earlier, around data quality and better understanding how to measure quality is also having that single view. So if you think you're going to do one and then do the other, you're going to learn a lot regardless. My suggestion is it's not governance first, master data second, or master data first, governance second. Is get them going at the same time, because the two will feed off of each other, and you're going to learn quite a bit. I get it. The master data management, it is a project. It's different than governance, right? Governance is a new way to do your business, and the oversight that goes with it. But the two are very linked together. So I would not say pick one and go with it and then come along and do the second one. I would say get them both started at the same time.
Here, here. Couldn't agree more. Chris, you'd mentioned that you're a little bit more mature from an MDM perspective. If you were to kind of summarize, what do you think are the 2 or 3 keys to success that got you to being where you think you are a little bit more mature? What's been the kind of the secret to success so far?
Well, one of our big pieces was centralizing all the operations. So we had a project, probably, gosh, about 15 years ago now, where we were moving from 3 individual ERP systems. Each geography had their own system, and they were having to consolidate. And we went to a global ERP system. And at the same time is when we went to a global MDM system, and we globalized all the operations to ensure that what we set up for a customer in Europe has all the requirements, and do those requirements apply to Brazil and Americas and Australia. And being able to globalize was a big benefit from our side, making sure everyone's setting up the customer the same way in the system and it gets across. And streamlining the integrations as well. As we're sending that new record, here's all the information, and we're sending it to the system, the target system, and whatever the target system wants to take out of it, that's their decision. But here's all that information as a single record. Here's everything you need. So I think those 2 things really helped make it as seamless as we could. Yeah.
That's a huge challenge for a lot of companies. We may want to come back to that, the kind of the idea of kind of full centralization so I suspect a lot of people are listening out there today are going, what do you mean about centralization? I'm trying to decentralize everywhere I can. So we may come back to that. I do want to address one of the comments in the chat. Rachel, couldn't agree more. Yes, readiness is often arguably maybe something created by consultants. Perhaps, I don't know. I love my consulting friends. I was a consultant. But yeah, you'll never ever be ready, as Ursula mentioned, and your data is already being used today. So either you get value out of it or you don't. So I welcome the comment and thank you. It's bang on. Now, Bruce, back to you. From the perspective of kind of like the why now, you had mentioned like files, right? So quite obviously you were running on legacy processes for quite a while. What was the tipping point, right? Like the why now? Were things breaking? Yes, it was part of your business strategy. You mentioned that already, but had you got to this kind of point where it's like, we're not even sure we can keep rowing this boat anymore? How was it?
So the why now? Yeah, we realized that we're relying on the file feeds for things like doing background checks of people that are coming into the Ys. So it had, security impacts. And then we also started receiving just a lot more analytical projects. And we recognized that the want we couldn't give because we can't tie the data together. So, we realized, well, we can select MDM to actually solve both of those problems. And we also have you mentioned earlier about householding. We have members that move around the country. We have Ys that change their CRM systems, and all of their member IDs become different, so we can't follow that member across time. So there's a lot of dynamics that happen that we were encountering that led us to this solution and making it part of a core component of our data strategy.
Fantastic. That's something that I would hear often when I was a gardener. Was that it was just all these combination of things, right? Like we can't continue to run on the files. We've got to move faster. During COVID, there was a whole bunch of things going on in terms of being able to respond, or maybe supply chain shocks and whatnot. I mean, all of the kind of the triggers are different for every company, of course, but I'm seeing certainly a common theme here. We've talked a little bit about governance. Ursula, you mentioned governance and the importance there. You turned your camera off. Maybe you did that by, oh, we lost Ursula. Of course, just because I was going to ask her a question. Hopefully Ursula will be back. Maybe Oliver nod through her internet connection. Oliver is her really, really cute little dog, by the way, that we got to meet.
I had a comment I wanted to make, Malcolm, about the
Please
governance
do.
side. It's interesting because, as I was saying, our master data team is quite mature at Lexmark, but in terms of an overall data governance strategy, we've never really had that before, and it's something the IT team is really looking heavily into right now. And what's interesting is that they've come to us as master data management to help as a pilot to say, how have you guys done governance for so many years that you've been doing it? What are your policies and procedures and in place, and how can we apply that outside of master data to our transactional data or accounting or sales and things? And so it's interesting how, again, as Ursula was saying, how the two tie together, and you can do one without the other, but it does help to have them hand in hand. And if one is more mature, it helps feed the basis for the other.
So that's fantastic to hear, that you're kind of actually being turned to as internal subject matter experts to act as internal consultants to the rest of the organization. Would you agree with what I just said?
Yeah.
So do you think that that's a function of kind of some of that centralization that you were talking about, the fact that you kind of created an MDM organization and you put it under a transformation mandate, and that you positioned yourself as the subject matter experts?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because when other areas and systems, when we talk about data governance and having data quality rules, no one else in the business has been doing that. It's always been just something they think of as associated with master data, that you have to have data quality and everything set up. But it's not just master data. It applies to every data, the importance of having that data owner and that data steward, and the responsibilities isn't just master data, but people in the past have always just thought of it as a master data piece, but it's not. Yeah. I really love this. And we got a comment from David Finley. Thank you, David. And thank you for joining, mentioning that it's kind of like an internal consultant role. And that's not really something we talk, I think, enough about. MDM is the enablement of shared data. And as data moves from one place to the other in an organization, or as data is shared, that consulting role, I think, is really, really important. So I'd love to hear that, Chris. That's cool. Hey, Ursula's back.
Yes.
We had wondered if Oliver had pulled out your power or something. Oliver's like the cutest dog on the planet, and glad you could make it back.
Sorry about that.
No, this is what happens in a live panel, right? Like if this was recorded, people would know, right? But this is live TV, because you don't call it TV anymore. Let's talk about the organization. Bruce, where is MDM living within your organization, and how are you kind of selling that concept, right? Because what Chris is talking about is acting as a consultant. We've talked a lot about kind of value and selling the value. How are you doing it at the Y?
So the way that we're selling the concept is, we've had about 3 years, maybe 4 years now, where we've had this program called National Reciprocity, which allows members to go to any Y around the country. we've been supporting that with files, and we've had, problems with that architecture. And then we've also, like I mentioned, the security and background checks. We've become responsible for doing those. And so in order to provide better security, we're using that as one reason for selling this. We're also using the reason of being able to track your members no matter what system you have, no matter wherever they go. We're using that as a selling point. And then, the data quality, that is also something that we're feeding back to them, but that's not like the primary selling point. I think it's really about giving the WISE the analytical information that they're asking for, and giving the WISE the security and knowing that we're doing the background checks appropriately.
So you got an interesting business model where it's you have customers and you have customers, which is another great justification for MDM, where you have the individual locations, which are customers, and then you have the members, and understanding the complexities there. You talked about members moving around. It's kind of not unlike maybe a giant retailer, or if you're like Lexmark, when you're manufacturing things and you've got customers that are 2 or 3 degrees removed from maybe the manufacturing process. Another great area where MDM is incredibly strong. Ursula, we talked a lot in the prep about your customer 360 and understanding all of your customers, and when it comes to selling MDM, what did that process kind of look like? Were you tied to a broader initiative? Was MDM kind of tagged along to something else, or was it standalone? And how do you tell the story of MDM to your executive peers?
So we already had it when I got to Huntington. And I say we already had it. We had sort of, I call it 2.5 MDM. So we had more than we needed. Which created confusion more than anything. I guess, and you think more than one's better. It was not better. So narrowing down who is sort of driving the ship and who are the recipients of the data was an important part of that process. I think also we've made a lot of investments. So that means eliminating one of those, that's an investment, right? Because we had already spent the money. We're making a decision to get rid of something. And the rework to then make a single customer master was not an insignificant investment either. In addition, there's a lot of improvements that we're making, and we're specifically using Prophecy to help with those. So our current customer master is a mainframe-based system. However, we're using Prophecy to help with all of the actual mastering work. So a mainframe is not great for mastering. A mainframe is great for the operational processes and connections and the resiliency that you need as a bank. However, it's not meeting all of the needs that we have around managing the customer master. And so that's where we're leveraging Prophecy to help us do that. And it's made a huge difference, but those were significant investments. And so having our executives understand how important that customer master is and why you want to make sure that you're managing it in a way different than just, oh, we have one. Okay, great. Because the story isn't over there, right? The ongoing work that goes into that is particularly important. And so that was really the sales point, is you want to do all these other things. You need us managing that data. As an organization, you need that single point. Just because we have a lot of that data already in the mainframe feeding operational systems, it doesn't manage itself, and we need tools to do that. And that's where Prophecy came into play.
So a common theme here is that, and I'm paraphrasing all of you, is that not all centralization is bad. and in some ways, and in many cases, it's required. Yeah. Right. No. In the case of the bank, most certainly legally required in many aspects. And for the other two participants here, optimal, arguably, to have that central view. So that's kind of interesting. I got a comment in the chat from Roman. Thank you. Yes, pitching MDM internally is something that everybody needs to know how to do. I'll make that certainly a podcast episode, although I would refer you to CDO Matters #1, where I'm talking to Scott Taylor, who's the expert in that. Internally, Chris, as those consultants, from the perspective of kind of like storytelling and explaining what MDM is, how do you do that? What is the narrative that you've built there internally?
We have, it's not easy discussion, because we pitch very specifically that as master data, we are the source system of truth. We are the one that has the right data. You can get our master data into your downstream system. You can be changing the records around downstream and locking that down, making that pitch of, this is master data. You have to own it and be responsible for it in this one system, because this system overrides whatever's going on in your other system. So that's been our main push, is the importance of that source system of truth, that there's one answer and it exists in master data.
On that note, I can't think of a better way to end. Just for all the attendees, thank you for attending. We're going to take about a 15-minute kind of bio afternoon snack break here in the East Coast, maybe quick lunch break on the West Coast, maybe time for a nightcap in Europe. But before we do that, I want to thank Bruce, Ursula, and Chris. Thank you guys so much for attending, for sharing your wisdom with the Data Hero Summit. I hope you'll do it again next year when we do this next time. For everybody else, please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already done so. I'm talking about these issues day in, day out on LinkedIn, and I'm also producing podcasts every other week, the CDO Matters podcast. I would invite you to subscribe. So to my fellow panelists, thank you again so much for attending. And for everybody else, we'll see you in about 15 minutes. Bye for now.
Thanks. Thank you.